And so I'd like to take a moment to introduce our board to you. What? I'm going to have to go over here to the computer. First, I'd like to introduce Michael Canty. Would you like to say a word, Michael?
Yes, my name is Michael Canty. I am a native here in Columbia. I met Rose one time at the archives, and we've been in touch ever since. And I'm glad to be part of this organization. I guess I'm serving as the vice president. That's it.
Okay. And then we have Marie Adams. Marie?
Oh, hey, everyone. I met Rose at I think it was a Juneteenth presentation years ago, and we've been connected ever since then. I work with the nonprofit Serco in the Lower Richland community, and I also represent the historic Harriet Barber House in Hopkins.
Okay, and she's our secretary. And then I'd like to introduce Dick Watkins. Dick? You want to unmute Dick?
I sent him a message to unmute. Okay,
so then we'll move on to Deidre. And Deidre is our media person. And Deidre and Marie are my right and my left hand. So they get things done for me. Deidre.
Hey, hello, everybody. Am I unmuted? Let me see. Let me unmute myself. Okay, yes, I'm unmuted. Okay, apparently I don't even know my own position because I thought I was the vice chair as well. So I don't know. Well, whatever I am, I met Rose online actually. And so she shared with me her vision for having a genealogy society, a group, and we started met Michael Canty and just, was able to get together, and we started this group just in, where did we start from? Was it in Jeremy's home? How did we start?
Yeah, that's right.
And so, so we, and it's just amazing what it's branched out to be. I'm glad to be a part of it, and welcome to all of you who are here today.
And last but not least, cousin Sarah Green. You want to unmute her?
Let's see, I have to send her a little note to unmute her. There you go.
Good afternoon, everybody.
And cousin Sarah, I met her. She did one of our videos that we did for interviewing seniors from Lower Richland. And she is a cousin of mine. So you're on, Sarah.
Hello, everybody.
My name is Sarah.
Hello. My name is Sarah Shiver Green.
I'm the
daughter of Peter and Lucy Atkins Shiver. I live in Gadsden, South Carolina. All my life. I lived in Gadsden. And I retired from USC in 2001. And I'm just glad to be in the meeting this afternoon.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. So if you'd like to know more about Lower Richland Heritage and Genealogy Society, you can visit us on Facebook. And at the end, Deidre will supply you some more information on how to contact us. We will meet every other month. Did Dick ever speak?
Dick is ready. He can speak now.
Can he hear us? we'll get to the dig at the end of the program, but we'd like you to
Yeah.
meet Dick also. Again, if you'd like to know more about us, Deidre's going to give you some more at the end of the meeting. We're going to meet via Zoom every other month. It's always going to be on the third Sunday at 3 o'clock, and hopefully we'll have the kinks out of we can get it started on time. Today, I'd like to introduce our presenter, who is Sonya Hodges Grantham. She's an avid researcher, curator, preservationist, and a sole restorer of Old Tiled Cemetery, which is located on Shop Road. Now, this cemetery dates back to Native Americans. Also, people who were enslaved are buried there. And during her research from 2009 until 2013, she discovered, and what's so important about this, she discovered that African Americans that served in World War I from the 371st Division are buried there. And they were the first Black regiment that was,
Trained.
It was trained at Camp Jackson, which is now Fort Jackson. And when they went overseas to fight in the war, they didn't fight with Americans, they fought with the French. And they were highly regarded. They were given a lot of recognition. They were decorated highly, but they weren't decorated or even acknowledged in the United States. And Sonya was able to install a memorial marker recognizing their patriotism to this country. So I'd like to acknowledge her for that. So today, Sonya's going to talk about people who lived in Lower Richland, families that lived in Lower Richland, and then moved into the Frogtown community. So I'm going to turn it over to Sonya now.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon.
I'm delighted to be here. Like Rose said, today I'm going to present the topic to you from Lower Richland to the original Frogtown community. I will briefly explain some of the families who migrated from Lower Richland to the Frogtown community, why they migrated, and what caused them to migrate and their lives after they migrated to Frogtown. So what I did, I outlined a little bit about each place. Lower Richland, South Carolina, is comprised of various cities. One of them is the Congaree, which means Native Americans, Eastover, Gadsden, Hopkins, which was formerly Hopkinsville, Hara Hill, Likes, comes from the name of Jesse Goodwin Likes, and that's how you got Likesland, Mill Creek, Pincushion. On the other hand, Frogtown is a village. It's composed of two streets, the 3800 block of Hayward Street and the 3800 block of Monroe Street. The first name for Frogtown was Blacktown. Then we had Milford Road. Milford Road was named after a contractor, Mr. Tolliver P. Milford and Charles Milford. You will see on some of the death certificates and the draft cards, 130 Milford Road. Then Hayward Street is the second street in Frogtown. Hayward Street is named for the former Governor Hayward, who served as governor of South Carolina between 1901 to 1907. Today, Monroe Street, and then they called it Shandon-Annex, which is the politically correct name. And then it was President Street as one time, 4th Street. Like I said, Frogtown is a village. We are comprised of family, faith, and friends, and our friendships have lasted forever. Frogtown is where the past lives today, and our love knows no bounds. Okay. From Lower Richland to the original Frogtown community, who were the families that migrated from Lower Richland to the original Frogtown community? I will explain when they migrated, why did they leave Lower Richland and their lives after arriving in Frogtown. A few of the families I will highlight are the Thompsons, which is my family, the Brown Wider family, which is another family that's interrelated, the Patterson family, and I will briefly give a history of the famous James Buster the Buzz Clarkson, the Jacobs, the Greens, the Grooms, and if time permits, I'll give a brief history of the Reeses. So let's begin here. Just where is the original Frogtown community? Some people ask me if it's in Beaufort, South Carolina. No. Is it in Arthurtown? No. Or Cabbagetown, New York? No. The answers to those questions are no, and they are fictional. Frogtown is located within the city of Columbia, and it is comprised of two streets, the 3800 block of Monroe Street and the 3800 block of Hayward Street. Although it's very little left of the original Frogtown community, but the community still exists. And here is a map here. I'm going to see if I can zoom it in, if it will allow me. Over here, you see one of the families. You see right here where the star is. I'm sorry, this is the best that the city could do with this map. And I'm going to say it's from around 1940. It's my grandmother here. When she moved into Frogtown, it was January of 1925, and she purchased 4 lots from the great grandson of the former plantation owner, Mr. Joseph A. Black. Up here, you see Mr. Johnny Richard Tillman. His address was 3806 Monroe Street, which he purchased from my grandmother in 1936. My grandmother also owned 3822 Monroe Street and 3814 Monroe Street. Here we have my grandfather here, Mr. Sanko Thompson Sr. and my grandmother. My grandfather left Lower Richland. He was born in Hopkins, South Carolina in 1892. And at the time, it was known as, it was called Hopkinsville, South Carolina. He left Lower Richland in 1917, and he married my mother, Mrs. Bessie Grantham Thompson. They married in December of 1917. So a year later, that same year, my grandfather, he enlists in the 371st Infantry Regiment, 93rd Division, Colored, of World War I. Now, it's very important that I leave the word colored in there, because if I were to move the word colored or not say the word colored, then it would be wrong. Miss Marie Adams, her grandfather served along with my grandfather in the 371st Infantry Regiment. They were the first soldiers to train at Camp Jackson. And later on, my grandfather returns home from the military in February 29th of 1919. He goes on and he becomes a laborer. Well, during this time, he was infected with pneumonia or something overseas, and he died March 1st, 1925, at the young age of 33 years old. So my grandmother, she goes to court. She litigates this case. She's awarded $5,000 for this case. It says $10,000, but it's 2 widows at the time that are receiving this pension. Over here, what is so significant about this case? Well, you see is Judge John Lyles Glenn. He was the ambulance driver during World War I. So he and my grandfather are born on the same day and the same year. My grandmother is a Black woman. She's living in the segregated South. We're in a depression. That was one reason people started leaving Lower Richland. They were coming out of the bondage of the farming industry. Remember, South Carolina goes into a depression during the 1920s. Over here at the bottom, it proves, I don't know if you can see it, that my grandmother purchased, Mr. Johnny Richard Tillman, he purchased a lot from my grandmother in 1935. Here you have my grandfather's death certificate. It's spelled Sandro Thompson. He was a laborer, and it proves that he was born in Hopkins. So it's very important that you read the death certificates and all documents pertaining to genealogy, because one thing may be wrong and you will have to amend it. Okay, this is a photo of just a child's cemetery where he's buried. So that's one significant. Okay, the reason why these people are migrating from Lower Richland to the original Frogtown community, remember, it's 1919, 1920, 1930s. The United States is in a depression during the 1930s. However, during the 1920s, that's when South Carolina went into a depression. It wasn't the 1930s. We were well into the depression during the 1930s. It did not hold true for South Carolina to enjoy the roaring 20s. So you have people, they are coming out of the bondage. You had some of your large cotton plantations, Mr. Moses Chappell Heath and Mr. Jesse Goodwin Likes. They had huge cotton plantations, but the cotton crop was destroyed. So you have another migration, not only north or to the west coast. You have people leaving Lower Richland and other rural areas. They're coming to the inner cities of Columbia to find work, and they're coming out of bondage. So let's remember the time frame, and what is going on. Here, I'm going to introduce the Patterson family. The Patterson family, this line that I've researched, they were, their early ancestors were slaves on the plantation of Andrew Patterson, who migrated to Richland County during the early 1790s. This man is Mr. Charlie Patterson. He was born a slave on the Patterson plantation. Here it is, his death certificate. He's 76 years old, and he was born in Lightsland. The person that's given this information is Sam Patterson. His descendants, his grandchildren and great-grandchildren, they left Lower Richland in the early 1920s. One was Miss Ethel Patterson. She was the granddaughter of Mr. Charlie Patterson. Miss Ethel Patterson, she lived in various homes in the Frogtown community. At first, she lived in a boarding house with her cousins and her son, Mr. John Patterson, and the Groom's family. And later they moved to 3830 Monroe Street, and they resided there for 30 years until they moved on Hayward Street. So here again, I have the proof. Mrs. Ethel Patterson Cason, you see, she's living at 3830 Monroe Street, and she's a member of Shiloh Baptist Church. She's buried in the Capernaum churchyard. This is her grave site. She died in 1976. Ms. Ethel also had roots in Florida. She and her late husband grew oranges, and they would bring oranges and lemons to the original Frogtown community every summer. And they would also send oranges by the boxes during the winter months. This is Mr. Charlie Patterson. He's the grandson of the Charlie Patterson Sr., who was born a slave in Lower Richland. Here you have again, his sister is Miss Ethel Patterson. They're living at 130 Milford Road, and that's Frogtown. Mr. Charlie Patterson, he began working for Mr. John Spears. Mr. Spears lived on top of the hill in Frogtown on Kilburn Road, and he was a warden at the old CCI. And so Mr. Charlie Patterson, he was working on the chain gang, but he lived in Frogtown for about 25 years before he relocated to the Waverly community. So here you have two families that migrated from Lower Richland to the original Frogtown community, and work brought them here to Columbia because they were able to find work and refuge and a place to live. Okay, here, this gentleman right here, he was born in Eastover, South Carolina, Mr. John Milton Patterson Sr. and his wife, Miss Roxy Jacobs. Mr. John Patterson Sr., he comes from the line of the Patterson men. All the Patterson men from the 1900s through the 1950s, they're all carpenters, cement finishers. They helped to build the major highways in the city of Columbia. And one highway they helped to build was the old Ghana's Ferry, was Wildcat Road that stretched all the way to Decker Boulevard. Mr. John Patterson, he lived at 3830 Monroe Street. He married Miss Roxy Patterson in 1947. They became the parents of 12 children, and they resided in Frogtown until they died. Mr. John Patterson, he worked as a cement finisher, and then he became employed by the city of Columbia in the beautification department. Miss Roxy Jacobs, she's the daughter of Mrs. Lizzie Jacobs, and on her census records, it has Mr. Sam Moy. Miss Roxy never met her biological father. She never knew him. So she was asking me before she passed away if I could find any information. But it's ironic, Mr. John Patterson Sr., he didn't know who his father was because his mother never told him, and Miss Roxy never knew her father. After retirement, Miss Roxy never worked outside of the home. They owned and operated Patterson's grocery store, and it was located in the rear, in the kitchen of their home, where they moved to 3807 Hayward Street. Miss Roxy is also, her mother moved to Frogtown with them when they relocated there. Now, how do I know this is true? Okay, here we have the draft card of Mr. John Milton Patterson Sr. They're living at 3824 Monroe Street. And here again, you have his mother here, Miss Ethel Patterson. So what I'm trying to say is these families and the migrants to Columbia, they migrated. Not that Lower Richland is a bad place, because it's a very historic place to live. And they left their land and came to Columbia by faith, and they never went back. The only thing that took them back was death or burial. So here I've explained two families. Another line of the Patterson family, you get Mr. Hubert Patterson and Lizzie Patterson Harris. They're the parents of Mrs. Mamie Patterson Israel. She was trying to tune in. They are also the first cousins of Mr. John Milton Patterson Sr. Mr. Hubert Patterson, he was born in Eastover, and he was the son of Susie Frazier. Here again, you have the same story. He doesn't know who his father is. And they would come and visit Frogtown all the time up until the death of their cousin, Mrs. Ethel Patterson Kaysen. This is the mother, Mrs. Lizzie Harris Patterson. She's the mother of Miss Mamie Patterson Israel. So here again, you have two lines of Pattersons in the Frogtown community. This is right here, we have where Hubert Patterson, he was murdered by Mr. Alton. Another line of families that you have is the Jacobs family. Mr. Irvin Jacobs Sr., let me pull up his photo here. Mr. Irvin Jacobs, he's seen right here. Mr. Irvin Jacobs, he was the lead singer. He migrated to Frogtown during the early 1940s. I'm sorry, my screen is not working for me, but Mr. Irvin Jacobs, he lived at 3815 Monroe Street. He served during the Second World War, and after the war, he came back to Frogtown. He rented an apartment at 3815B Monroe Street, and he worked for the National Guard. He was an employee of the National Guard for more than 40 years, and he was the lead singer. His voice could be heard throughout the community singing with harmony, and his nickname was Uncle Nate. He lived at 3815B Monroe Street, and he operated a piccolo joint. And the back door of the piccolo joint, when you stepped out of the piccolo joint, you stepped right into his house. So they were hardworking people. They were not lazy people. They established family there, and they helped to build generations. Mr. Irvin Jacobs, his wife, was also from Lightsland, South Carolina. Her name was Benzie Lee Ruth. But here you have Mr. Irvin Jacobs right here. And he was the lead singer for the Southern Gospel Singers. They were established in the Frogtown community during the 1940s, and they sang throughout the city of Columbia, Eastover, and the state of South Carolina for more than 40 years. All of them are dead now, but Uncle Nate, he had a voice that you couldn't touch. You could hear his voice throughout the community when they were practicing quartets. And here again, to prove, here is Mr. Irvin Jacobs. He was born in Eastover, and here's his mother here. And this 1921, at this time, he's unemployed. So it proves everything I said, you know, that they moved in Frogtown. They migrated from Eastover to Frogtown. Can anybody tell me about these two? Who are they? How are they connected to Lower Richland? Anybody want to try to tell me? This?
Yes, I can.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, that's the family of the late Sampson Brown.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, his mother was a whiter.
Yes. And
That's all I know.
And I know, like, from the Waters come from the Fullenwater family.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and also the Whiters are a part of that family of free people of color, Lower Richland.
Right.
And Sonya Fullen-Whiter has done a lot of research on the Native American ancestry in Lower Richland. And many of them migrated from around Lumberton, North Carolina, and then came down into this area. But she has a lot of interesting research and a lot of photographs of those people, all related to the Whiter and Brown families. The Jacobs are part of that group also. The Harrises from Eastover, the
Clarksons.
No, the Clarksons weren't part of this. No.
They married into his sister's married.
Yeah, maybe by marriage.
Yeah, by marriage. Yeah.
The other name is the Chavis family.
Mm-hmm.
And the Portees, the Outons. Oh gosh,
What about the Taylors?
And the Taylors are
Yes.
the
And
Taylors,
Wilson, I believe it's the other name, Wilson.
Yeah, Wilsons, the Reeses. I can't call them all, but
yes,
I'm familiar with that family history.
Okay.
Yes. This is Miss Carrie Whiter Brown and her husband, her son. One of her sons, Walter Hughes Brown. Miss Carrie Whiter Brown, she was married to Julius Brown, and they migrated from Lower Richland. Then in the 1920s, I see them, they were living in Edgewood, over near Center Street and Two Notch Road. And then they came to Frogtown. When they came to Frogtown, Reverend Walter Hughes, we called him Snoots and Uncle Snoots. He's a graduate of Booker T. Washington High School around 1931, 1932. and he's in school we're in a depression during the Depression era. He goes on to Allen University School of Theology, and he becomes a minister in the AME Zion Church. They purchased a home from his father-in-law, Mr. Jacob Wren, and they operated the community grocery store, and it was called Brown's Grocery. It was in operation for about 30 years, and the building is still there. It has been sold, so that's why I don't have a picture, because they didn't give me permission to post the picture. But anyway, they lived at 3812 Monroe Street, and the same property is still in their family to this day. Also, Mr. Brown and his wife, Miss Willadine Wren Brown, they owned and operated a barbecue pit in the Arthurtown community, and it provided jobs for their family members, and people in Frogtown worked for them. So here you have another family that's interrelated to the Jacobs family and to the Thompson family and to the Taylors, and the Clarksons married into the Brown family. One of his sisters married a Clarkson, one of them married a Taylor. So my theory is that all of these migrants, they knew each other, and one family told the other about what they could find in the Frogtown area. And that's when they started coming. And when they came, they didn't come to rent homes. They were able to purchase their homes, even during the Depression era. And they built generations and established homes. And they helped to establish the history of the original Frogtown community. Briefly, here is Julius Brown, the husband of Carrie Whiter Brown. You see Bloomwood right here. Bloomwood Road is located about 2 blocks from Frogtown. He's buried in the Palmetto Cemetery. And here you have a Taylor down here, that's the informant. This is Miss Carrie Whiter Brown. You see, she's living at 3812 Monroe Street. Her father was John Whiter. She was a housewife. Her husband was Julius E. Brown. And here you have Walter H. Brown. He's the informant. This is his draft card. Same thing. Milford Road. He's a pastor. This is the spouse, Mrs. Willie Dean, Mama Dean Wren Brown. She, like I said, she was the spouse of Mr. Walter Hughes Snoop Brown. She was not a native of Lower Richland, but they met each other in Lower Richland, and they later married. And this is just her obituary, and it proves that they were living on Monroe Street. Ms. Dean was the one that operated the store, and they had a kitchen right on the side of the store, and she fed everybody who wanted a meal. So people would arrive at the store as early as 7 o'clock in the morning to ask Mama Dean for something to eat. All the new babies that were born in the community, Mama Dean would give them Kennedy $50, at least 5 of them, to every child that was born in the community. And this lasted until she died in 1970. So when you talk about the store has history, even though their homes are gone and have been demolished for many, many years. All the families have a history to share, not only from Lower Richland, but to Frogtown as well. And this is Miss Dean. She was born 1916. Her parents were Jacob Wren and Leela Flood. They are living at 3813 Monroe Street. This is one of the Taylors, the daughters of Miss Carrie Whiter Brown. Here is Viola Taylor. You see her husband is Samuel Taylor. They lived in Frogtown briefly too for a number of years before they moved, before they relocated. The next family I will introduce is Mr. Charlie Green. Mr. Charlie Green, he was born in Eastover, South Carolina in 1897, and they came to Frogtown around 1938. Mr. Charlie Green, he had three sons and one daughter. Mr. Charlie, he picked cotton at first, and then he obtained a job on the railroad, and he retired from the railroad. He, at the time of his death, he was living at 3831 Monroe Street, and his children, he received a pension from the railroad. And before I was born, my sisters and brothers, they would always tell me that he would inform them of what life was like picking cotton in Lower Richland. And he was so glad that he could relocate to a place to obtain and establish a living, and that was in Frogtown. He worked on the railroad for more than 25 years before he retired, and he left an estate to his children. That's his death certificate. This is a notice, the final discharge. Here you have Mr. Charlie Green Sr., and this is 1963. And then you have his daughter, Miss Helen Smith. Miss Helen was employed with General Dozier, James C. Dozier. Mr. Dozier was the adjutant general in South Carolina for more than 40 years. And she worked for them for more than 42 years until she retired. Miss Helen had 9 children, but only 2 are living, and they were all born in Lower Richland. And this is a photo of Miss Helen, the daughter of Charlie Green, born in Eastover. And right here, you have Miss Bessie Garner Green at 3829 Monroe Street. She was born in Eastover as well in 1900, but her first husband passed away. And when he passed, they moved to Frogtown around 1937, and she purchased the lot and the home from Mrs. Janie Spears, and she lived in Frogtown until she died in 1982. She was 80 years old at the time of her death, and her husband was a cement finisher. So here you have the Garner Groom family, another migrant from Lower Richland to Frogtown. This is her husband, Mr. Jesse Groom. He died at the old Columbia Hospital. This proves that they were married, and he was a brick mason, and he worked to help build many of the highways and the new schools in the 1930s. This is Mr. Deacon. My screen is not cooperating with me. This is Deacon Walter Green. You probably have heard his name in and around Columbia and in Richland County because he was employed with 2 of the most prominent families in Richland County. One was the Sylvans. He was employed at Sylvan's Jewelry Store during the 1940s. And then during the early 1960s, he became employed with Ben Arnold, and he was employed with Ben Arnold for more than 30 years. I'm going to say a total of 40 years, because after retirement, he still would go back and work for the Arnold family. And he was the founder of the group, the quartet group, the Southern Gospel Singers, and they would practice at his home at 3817 Monroe Street. And he would appear on WOIC radio on Sunday morning. He gave devotion services. He led the devotion services, and he was a member of Bethlehem Baptist Church in his later years. He fathered 4 children, and one of the children are deceased. The youngest child is deceased, but he was a prominent man in the original Frogtown community, always willing to lend a helping hand. And here he is right here. This is his obituary, Mr. Walter Green and Mr. Jesse Green. Mr. Jesse Green was a bricklayer and he relocated to Philadelphia, but his funeral was held in Frogtown at Shiloh Baptist Church. So here again, you see all these families, they have migrated from Lower Richland to Frogtown, but it didn't stop there. They were hard-working people. They came, sure, for economic reasons, but you don't see them. You see all of them were gainfully employed, and they helped contribute to the community. And we were all one happy family. Sure, we had our problems, but upon arrival, they established roots right there in Frogtown that extended from Lower Richland to Frogtown and throughout Richland County and the state of South Carolina. Here we have Mr. James Buster Clarkson, also known as the Buzz Clarkson. Mr. Clarkson, he played in the Negro Leagues, and he's related to the Clarksons and the Taylor family. But Mr. Brown, Reverend Snoots Brown, he told us a lot of stories about Mr. Clarkson, how when he was little, he played baseball in Hopkins, and that's where he was born. He grew up playing baseball, and he played baseball throughout his life until he couldn't play baseball anymore. He played for the Philadelphia Eagles. Also, this is a jacket that was worn by one of the players in the Negro Leagues. He didn't wear this jacket, but he played for the Ethiopians Clowns, which later became the Indianapolis Clowns. And that's one of the original jackets. Not only did Clarkson play in the Negro Leagues, he played baseball in Puerto Rico and in Mexico. And then he briefly played Major League Baseball for the Milwaukee Brewers, but not long. He died in 1989 in Philadelphia. Not in Philadelphia, but in the state of Pennsylvania. And there again, it proves everything that I have said about this famous man. Marie, do you know anything about him? Did you know anything about Buster Clarkson? Are you Rose? How about you, Deidre? Did anybody know anything else about this man and his family?
I can truly say this is my first time hearing his name.
Okay, yeah, because, well, he, like I said, Reverend Brown, he would tell us stories how he watched Mr. Clarkson play baseball as a child when he was in Eastover. And this is his birth certificate. This is just proof, this proves that he was born in Hopkins, South Carolina. His father was Willie Clarkson, and his mother was the former Annie Cole. He even served during World War II, and after World War II, he came back and played baseball again with the Negro Leagues and the minor leagues.
I have heard something about this Buster Clarkson, and I believe in Almost Forgotten, the book that's about the Clarkson family that Brenda Clarkson Turpo published a couple of years ago. Rose, you know her. I believe he is mentioned in there. If I'm not mistaken, that might have been where I first heard about him. But yeah, I recognize the name.
Okay.
I'll have to go back and look through my copy because I was just reading the book the other night.
Okay.
Okay. Yes, but he was a famous baseball player. And so often our history is omitted and left absent from the history books. So it's up to us. We have to teach the generation that's coming along now, because if we don't, our history will remain buried. So we have a lot of history in Lower Richland. The next family are the Reeses. I'm sure you all have seen this photo. This is Mr. Sampson Reese, and here we have it again, Mrs. Lula Florence Reese, Jacobs Reese. They came to Frogtown during the early 1930s, and they purchased a lot and at 3810 Monroe Street, and Mr. Sampson Reese built the house himself. They had about 12 children, and I knew all of them because they all resided in Frogtown at one time or another. Here is the will that proves Mr. Sampson Reese was living in Frogtown. It was called Milford Road at the time. He's buried at Capernaum Cemetery, and his wife, Lula Reese, she's the informant here. Here's a will of Mr. Sampson Reese. This will and his estate has never been settled. It has never been settled, even though the house that was built by one of his children, Mr. George Jacob W. Reese, it has never been settled, this will. So when it comes time, they are going to have to settle with 5 to 6 generations, because all the children of Sampson Reese are deceased. A lot of the grandchildren are deceased. So they're going to have to go back 5 generations to settle this estate. And it's going to be a mess. And it's just a small lot at 3810 Monroe Street. You see here, he's his son's name down here is Mr. Jacob Reese. Let's see, this young lady is Miss Rebecca Marbeck Newton Reese. And I'm sure you know the history of the Reese's family, this line. Rebecca Newton Reese, she married into the Reese's into the Reese family. She married James Reese, and his nickname was Fuzzy. They lived at 3824 Monroe Street during their time. But however, she and her husband, they were the first to really own a community care home for older citizens in the city of Columbia. After they left Frogtown, they owned and operated Reese's Community Care, and it's still in business to this day. Rebecca had a sister, Hattie Newton Fooster. I'm sure everybody knows her. Their father was a civil rights leader, as well as Miss Hattie Newton Fooster. Ma Beck is a graduate of Booker T. Washington High School. She was a licensed cosmetologist, and their community care home is still in operation today by their oldest son, Mr. James Reese. So we had a lot of people migrating from Lower Richland that brought a wealth of knowledge and talents with them when they came to Frogtown. And like I said, it spread not only to Frogtown, the tree limbs expand throughout the state of South Carolina and the city of Columbia. She was a member of Chapel Memorial AME Church, and also she did hair. She owned a beauty salon as well, and she would come back to Frogtown to press and curl the people's hair that needed pressed and curl. Here I have her obituary. You see, she was a lady of elegance and style. And this is her sister's obituary, Miss Hattie Newton Fooster. All right, their brother was Robert Newton. Robert Newton, he did not reside in the original Frogtown community, but he visited Frogtown. He died in an auto accident on May 29th, 1970. This is his part of, it was no inquest report. I just got this from the coroner's office. Excuse me, I am so sorry, this thing. And it has no inquest. The driver of the car, he was hit by a motor vehicle near Eastover, South Carolina, and with a fractured skull. Here he is, Robert Newton Jr., colored male, 42 years old. He was born 1927, and this is his address in Eastway Park at the time of his death. The last slide I'll bring up is these two ladies. They are the children of Mr. Sampson Reese, Miss Carolyn Reese Weston, and Miss Sarah Alice Reese Tillman. They lived at, Miss Tiny is a graduate of Booker T. Washington High School. She was also a licensed practical nurse. She lived in Columbia. She graduated from the Waverly School of Nursing, and she held several talents. She was a frequent visitor after she relocated from Frogtown to take care of the sick. Anybody that was sick, they would just say, let's call Miss Tiny. She would know what to do. So here you have nurses, carpenters, you have entrepreneurs, all coming from Lower Richland to contribute to the original Frogtown community. This is her sister, Miss Sarah Alice Reese Tillman, born in Lower Richland, migrated to Frogtown during the mid-1930s. Her husband was a brick mason, Mr. Johnny Richard Tillman. He built the second church in Frogtown in 1966. Miss Sarah and Mr. Johnny, they were entrepreneurs as well. They owned an entertainment site, which was next door to their home. It was called the Hash House. So they operated this Hash House for more than 25, I'm gonna say 30 years, into the late 1960s. And when the Hash House closed, it was a mechanic shop. Everything was adjacent next door to their home. And Miss Sarah and Mr. Johnny, they purchased their home at 3806 Monroe Street from my grandmother. So here again, you have all these families. They're all interrelated to each other, and they have established generations. Miss Sarah and Mr. Johnny, they were the parents of 10 children. And then this is Mr. Joseph Reese. He was another son of Sampson Reese and Lula Jacobs Reese. He was born around 1923, and he resided in the original Frogtown community. So what I have established here, I have established that all of these families, they knew each other. They are interrelated to each other. They left Lower Richland to seek a better life in the city of Columbia, Richland County. Their talents led them to become homeowners during a time when the United States was in a depression. They took what they had and they left their children what they had. And that was the value of hard work and helping to establish community history. Community history is a very important part of our family history, because community history, you can unlock doors to the past. The past still lives in our lives every day. So when we have community history, we have the stories, we have the hidden history that's been buried for so many years. Let's keep it up. Let's keep the work up to establish this and to keep sharing what we know and what we have for the generations yet to come. And I will conclude my presentation here for time. Does anyone have any questions?
Yes, I have a question. There were several references to a Shiloh or New Shiloh Church.
Yes.
Do you have any information about the location of that church in Lower Richland?
Not in Lower Richland. The Shiloh that I'm familiar with the church. I visited Shiloh in Lower Richland. I believe it's AME church. I believe.
No, this was a Baptist church. And from what I understand, and this was years ago, it was located across from the historic church down past the Wavering Plantation, the St. John's Episcopal Church, the historic church there. off of, that's not, what's Congaree Road. So there are actually some graves or headstones that are still on the property, on the side of the road where the St. John's Episcopal Church is. But I think it was John Middleton, Reverend John Middleton, who mentioned that as possibly the location of this Shiloh Church in Lower Richland. I was just wondering if it was the same.
The reason why I was wondering whether it was a Methodist church, because they have a Shiloh AME church somewhere in Lower Richland as well. But I haven't been in years. This Shiloh Baptist church, the former slave owners used to own the land, and the church is still in the community. I think they have about 15 members now. But the first church was an old board church, and then they demolished the church, and then Mr. Johnny Richard Tillman rebuilt the church in 1966. But it has dwindled. They don't have many members at all. It's also Shiloh was where Reverend Solomon Jackson, he was the pastor when he won the lottery at this church. He was pastoring Shiloh.
Any other questions?
I didn't mean to bore you. Sorry, my screen didn't. But,
Your screen actually was fine the entire time.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it was fine. It was, I mean, I think everybody could see everything clearly. I know you were concerned about it being too small, but I thought it was a very good size if you're watching on a laptop, or you can enlarge on your phone. But yeah, you did a great job.
But all of these families, when they came, gosh, I've been writing history since I was 8 years old, but I did not know what I was doing. And I would put it down, and then I'd go back years later and I'd write some more. But I knew all of these people firsthand, except for Mr. Sampson Reese. And we're like one happy family. You know, what one person needed, if one person had, we all had. And they all took me, especially Ma Beck, as their little girl, and Mr. Walter Green and all of them. Mr. Walter was like a mentor to everybody. And we would pick at him singing quartets. We still mock him to this day.
Okay, we have a couple of comments that's in the chat room. One question, well, several say great presentation. This is great stuff, awesome history, wonderful presentation, enjoyed the great information. And then here's a couple of questions. One was any additional information on Mrs. Bessie Garner? She believes the surname was Newton.
No, Miss Bessie Garner, she was a Garner, born in Eastover, South Carolina. And she married a man by the name of, with the last name of Snipes at first. And then they moved to Charleston, and I believe he was killed in World War I. They had one daughter named Queen, and she received a pension from her husband's, she received a widow's pension, and she moved to Frogtown during the 1930s. This is yours. And she worked for a family by the name of the Munkenfoos. And everybody was so mad because they were paying her $7 a week when she would work all day long at the house and take care of the children and cook. And he would come in the little Chevy Nova bringing her a check for $7, no more than $7.50.
$26.45 short. Have you found it?
Okay, I have one other question.
Federal bank examination.
Do you have in your research any connection to these families settling in Frogtown as possibly part of the relocation of families who originally lived in the area where Fort Jackson.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
The
Because
Pattersons.
these names, yeah, are documented as landowners who had to move out of the area in order for Fort Jackson to be built and expanded. Because I remember the Reese family, all of those, basically the same free people of color who were actually landowners. Yeah, there's a Jacob Reese.
Yeah. Now he was a carpenter. He worked at, he was employed with Fort Jackson for more than 40 something years.
But these families, did you find that they came from that area and settled here? Because these are basically the same families who were in the area where Fort Jackson now stands.
Yes. I wish Miss Mamie Patterson was on, because we found, I did a lot of research on her family, the Fullenwiders. I found the information on the Fullenwiders, Mr. Preston Harris. I found a lot of documents where he sold land to help build, when Fort Jackson. So I found the Pattersons.
Yeah, I think some of them sold land willingly, but others couldn't keep their land or whatever.
It was mainly forced, because where I live now, just a portion of what, they have a little part across from my neighborhood that's called Jacobsville. But when I look on previous census, my whole area where my neighborhood is, it was nothing but Jacobs all the way around, this area. Right. And I know it ventured on to what is now Fort Jackson, because they had so many acres of land, each person.
That's right.
So, and now what is down to is just a few acres. And of course, my neighborhood right in front of it. So you have like this, subdivision, and then across the street, there's rural subdivision, just rural area.
Yeah.
And it's so amazing, when we think about, yes, sometimes people, move willingly because they were looking for better opportunity, but some were forced from where they had prime land so that the government could have property. The same goes for McIntyre as well.
And it's interesting now, the Black people that were there, another family, they're not white, but it's the Daniels Davis family. Fort Jackson is still paying them to lease this land. Because see, right there where the old Kmart was on Jackson Boulevard, that was Hampton Creek in here. Let me see here. That's the Child Cemetery. Up in here, you have Andrew Patterson living up in here. And Andrew Patterson's, one line of them, they built these highways and interstates from Wildcat Road all the way to Decker and Purcellville Road. Down here, you have the Bluff Road right in here. But where's that Hampton? Gosh, that's the Weeks family that's in here. That's the Childs is somewhere. The Hampton family is somewhere in here. But across the street where the Bilo is, that was a dairy. That was the Daniels Dairy at one time. Oscar Norman Daniels and his wife, gosh, I forgot her first name, but she became Mrs. Stubbard. But that was a part of Fort Jackson. But across the street where the old Kmart is, that the federal government to this day, because I have seen the papers as late as the 80s before Miss Genevieve Davis died. She showed me that they were still paying them to lease part of Fort Jackson near Gate 5 and Eastover. So with the white people, they benefited very well. And they said the first set of the Black people that were living down there benefited from the federal government sale of Camp Jackson. very well, but during the 1930s, that didn't hold true in the 1940s. But you still have parts of Fort Jackson that are still being leased and that are not owned by the federal government. But I remember during the research, when I was researching the Patterson family, they were there, the Fullen-Widers and the Harris, because I found some articles where the federal government paid them. I think one of them was around $250.
Okay, here's a question here. One is, did Ms. Grantham write a book about this? And
Damn, I wanted to get it.
yeah.
What kind of a
Could you hear me? Did you write a book about this? That's
Oh, yes. Several.
yeah.
Several.
So definitely you I guess get your information so that we can let them know how to purchase it. And then they say they heard, okay, somebody said they heard the name Gardner mentioned before. And then here's another part, which I can probably answer part of this, but it says, was that Fort Jackson area a part of what we call the Sand Hills? And the Sand Hills would be a part that's further down into Eastover area. That back part of Fort Jackson would be the part that's the Sand Hills, not the entire part of Fort Jackson.
No, not the entire part.
Right. And the part where some of the Jacobs came from, I mean, they inhabited a whole lot of it from, and some of these families you're talking about from Eastover all the way up into what, where I live, which is in Columbia.
And not only that, when these people were migrating, they owned land.
Yeah.
The Patterson family,
Yeah.
more than 400 acres of
Yes, they own the land.
And they left, like I said, they left on faith, and they came because my siblings, they're in their 80s and late 70s. They told me a lot about Mr. Charlie Green, how he told them how life was working, you know, on the farm, and they just didn't want to do that. So Miss Bessie Garner Groom, she was already living up here. So she prepared for them to come up here. And Mr. Charlie got a job on the railroad and retired.
So did you talk about the wall?
No, that's another presentation all by
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, but that wall, it's a famous wall, and I've named it Frogtown Sensational Wall because it has thousands of eyes and ears that are not visible to the human eye. And I'm glad because the wall can't talk, and if it could, we would be in trouble, and I'm one of them.
And so does anyone else have any more questions or any comments for our speaker? Well, if everyone could just unmute themselves and let's give her a round of applause for all of the great information she provided. And I'm sure we heard something that connected us with someone here today. So let's give her a warm round of applause. Come on, clap. Yay.
Excellent, excellent.
Thank you all. I
It was
enjoyed it.
excellent. I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Thank you so much. And
I may have missed the beginning, but how can you become a member of the Lower Richland County Historical Society?
okay, this is Rose. This is Rose.
Go ahead, Rose.
Deidre's going to share that information with you, but I just want you to mark your calendars. Our next meeting is going to be April 18th, 3 o'clock Zoom. So look out for it.
And I have one announcement to make too, if I can, Rose.
Go for it.
Yes, during the month of April, I guess I'll have to do it via Zoom. I'm going to open a museum. I will be coming live from the old Perrin Thomas School down in Taylor's. And you will see artifacts from the original Frogtown community featuring obituaries. You will see church fans. You will see the businesses, artifacts from the businesses that were there. Coble Dairy, Shoney's, the dry cleaners, the grocery stores that were there, Simpson's Grocery. You'll also see something from Sylvan's Jewelry. So if you join me, I will be sending out the link to the invitations, and I will be on featured on WLTX, channel 19 in about 10 days. Speaking about the wall.
Also, this is Rose again. Sonya, you can also post it on our website.
Okay. All right. It was nice seeing my family and friends. I hope you all be blessed and safe.
You also. Deidre?
Thank you.
All right.
Deidre, for those who did not see, you quickly put up the information on how to contact us, how to join, and how to continue to get information. You just want to share verbally?
Okay, here I am. Let me unmute myself. I'm going to mute everybody else if y'all don't mind. All right. So, everyone, if you want more information about how to join, please send an email to Lower Richland. That's LOWERRICHLAND, and that's H as in heritage, HGS @gmail.com, or you can check our Facebook page, and an edited version will be posted there soon. So just give me some time to edit it or whatever, and to edit the video. And so and if you would like to join, like I said, please send us an email and at lowerrichlandhgs @gmail.com. And so I want to thank you all for being a part of our program today. Thank you all for your interest and your enthusiasm, and for your patience getting into our Zoom meeting. And so I want to thank Rose for coordinating this, and again, thank our speaker for the wealth of knowledge that she shared today. And I look forward to seeing you all, not this month. What's the next month? April?
April 18th.
April 18th will be our next time. So look for a link from me. Look for the opportunity to register. If you join, then you'll get a direct link from Rose. She'll email you. And so that's it. Thank you all so much for being a part of this today. And we're grateful for our time together, and we hope to see you all again next time.
One other thing, Dick is unmuted.
Yeah, he's not muted. He can come on if he wants to.
I guess he doesn't. He's going to be quiet. Oh, he muted himself. I guess he doesn't want. Well, Dick Watkins brings a lot to the table with land history.
Yes.
We'd like to thank him. Very a big part of our organization. And again, if you're interested in joining us, email us, Facebook. If you have any questions, if we can assist in any way, reach out. And Noreen, thank you for coming. I think we met via social media or on Ancestry with the Goodsons and the
You are correct. We did.
yes, yeah. So I appreciate it. And you're Deidre's cousin also, correct?
I believe so.
Yes.
Okay. I'd like to thank my brother and sister for showing up.
Yes.
Next time, Inspector Marquette would like to see both this. I'm available.
Fine, we'll head downtown right away.
Okay, so everyone, will see you in a couple months.
Yes. All right. Thank you all. And we're going to end now. Have a blessed evening.
You also.
You too.